Well, hello again, everybody. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, good wherever in the beautiful world you are. Welcome to Aquarius Rising Africa. And it's Friday, and I have this incredible guest with me today. Wow, Lira Nikolaev, welcome.
Hi.
I want to welcome you to as my guest today. And
Thank you.
you kind of contacted me a few weeks ago after
Mhm.
we had the show with Jessie, and we were talking about the child soldiers and the way that a couple of years ago she mentioned, particularly Reagan in the 80s, where she was actually present, and there was a arms show, weapons exhibition of sorts, and the weapons were kids. Really, and these were kids who they've weaponized. What they've done is they've taken their spiritual gifts and they've completely weaponized them and can use them literally as um, spies is not the word, depending, I guess, on what they're used for, what they,
Mhm.
what are. They are completely, and kids being innocent, and especially girls. I remember Fiona Barnett, who was also in a similar program. I can't
Mhm.
say similar. I think each one is different, but was also trained from the age of 1 by the CIA and into the military. And she was what they called the Alice's. They were the Jasons and the Alice's, and she was trained in the Alice program. So it's very, very interesting. So I want to just say to you before I launch in with a whole lot of questions, because wow, this has been so interesting chatting to you last night. And thank you for stepping forward after our show and taking taking the hot seat here with me. Welcome, Lira. How are you?
I'm well. Yes, what Jesse said in 1984, when Reagan gave them the permission, that just, I snapped inside because in 86, that's when the Chernobyl accident happened. And Gorbachev, right? Well, it's the Russians. They just jumped on the opportunity to start creating those soldiers. And what happened with Chernobyl, I was 6 years old. I was born in 79, 6 years old. By the time September came, from April to September, I was having sharp pains in my gut. And a lot of other children were just coming down with the various sicknesses. Radiation will affect your heart, your mitochondria, your immunity just goes kaput, stomach ulcers, and so on. They recommended that my parents put me into the hospital for detox. So there I go to the hospital for detox for 2 weeks. And what happened was there was a very, very bland diet. And then there was some blood drawn every day, morning, night. There were shots in the mornings. There were shots sometimes in the afternoon. Um, they would take our stuff from our intestines, the gastric juices. Um, that's kind of what I remembered. And at the very end of the 2 weeks, you had animus, and they will just drain you out of drain the life out of you, but they're just
Wow.
draining, getting the radiation out of you. At least that's what they said. I was in the room. It was just me right across the nursing station. There was a little girl there before me with a grandmother, and the room next to me, it had about 2 dozen girls at the most. There was at the most about 12 of us on that floor, and we were on the last floor in the last wing of the hospital. There were bars on the door. They kept us under the lock. I remember parents waiting outside the door, barred door, before they unlocked for them to come in. Like, it's not like we're going to run away anywhere. So time went by. Um, I was a very angry person. I know a lot of my friends don't think this, but if you ask my sister, she would tell you. I mean, I was brutal growing up, and I didn't know why. I came from a very third
Can I
generation.
Can I just ask you, sorry, and I want to take up with that, but I want to just kind of backtrack a little bit to the initial stages of how this began for you. Because in our conversation that we had off air, I found it very interesting what you were saying. We've learned a lot in the past 2 years about what happens with a lot of our the American survivors and stuff like that who've been in the American, European, and even in the South African systems, right? And what seems to be a common thread there is that you're either going to get your expendable kids, which are going to be used for their sacrifices and rituals and stuff, but then you get your bloodline kids, the hierarchy kids with spiritual gifts. So depending on that, and invariably there's a parent or a grandparent or both that will sell you or put you into the system, and you then get programmed and handled and trained according to the spiritual gifts that you that they pick up, they find within you, that emanate from you, that are yours, basically. I'm sorry, I can't find the right word right now. So that would be the American way and the way we've understood it. But what you said to me, in fact, is in Russia, and you from the Ukraine, I want to just point that out. You Ukrainian, not Russian. But what you explained to me in the Russian system is that they don't really they don't care about your bloodlines. They don't care about that sort of thing. How does the system work there when they take in children like yourself into the system? How do you get chosen then? And did your parents know?
No, none of us knew. I didn't know until I was triggered by tile. We were remodeling our bathroom and I had to pick out the tile, and every tile that I looked at, no matter how expensive, I was still getting heart palpitations. Like there's something about this tile that I just can't stand. Don't have peace about it. And then about that same time, this was almost 2 years ago, I came across Dan Duval, Jesse, and Amanda Bice. Like at the same time, Holy Spirit just put that in front of me. And I was listening and agreeing with their prayers to where you are remembering, your amygdala is being open and you're remembering things. And at the same time, it was a daily thing for me to be asking for the spirit of truth to be upon me. I wanted to know the truth. Like, okay. So anyhow, it's through the tile I get memories start coming back. And I remembered when I was at the hospital for those 2 weeks, one of the times I remember being about a dozen of us in the room. It was a long room, 3 sets of bunk beds side to side. And we were laying there and they put electrodes on our body. And it's the locations of those electrodes are for Kabbalah. It's based on the Kabbalah. Basic Kabbalah, however you said, Kabbalah training. And I remembered as a 6-year-old laying there and thinking, like, they are not putting these electrodes where my pain is in the gut. I'm like, they're missing. I'm going to have to tell my parents that they're not doing it right, So I remembered that, which was just bizarre. Another thing that I remembered was it was a similar room. Oh, and the room was covered. All the walls were covered in tile. And as you know, tile is very easy to wash. No matter how many guts are spilling, feces or blood is spilling on the walls, you just come down, with the hoses and hose all of it down. It's the easiest thing to clean. So a lot of the times when they're doing all of these brutalities on people, they will be in a tiled room for that reason. And so another room was, in that room, similar. It was, again, dim, very, very dim. And there were big steps on there. And there was children. We weren't sitting too close together, but we were looking at a projector, a screen. And on that screen were a bunch of planes, single pilots planes. It was during World War II when they were bombing just everywhere. We're specifically seeing the bombing happening in the planes. And that went into the sleeper soldier program. So sleep, we can touch on it later, or I can go into it
Yes,
now.
yes, definitely.
Okay.
Well, whatever you feel. I mean, I'm very happy for you to touch on it whenever. We can definitely speak about the sleeper soldiers. That's very
You know,
interesting. Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
let me finish this part. We'll come back to it. Okay. Yeah, that is something to talk about. So, and then the other thing that I remembered was this time I was in the other room, also tiled walls, very dim, but this time it was a large bed to where you can do whatever you need to do to that person. And it was just that one bed and just me in the room. And again, I remember the electrodes. And of course, every time we were in that room, those 3 times that I remembered, there was a like outside of a nursing station with all of the computer screens, the towers. They had a lot of computer screens. So there was a programmer and there were the computer screens. That's the other thing that I remembered. And how they do it is, I'm a seer. The reason why they got me, one of the reasons, is because I have the clairvoyance. I can get into people's heads. And that was, you know, how to basically travel in the spiritual realm, because we're electrical people. We live in an electrical universe. Our feelings are like magnets. So anyhow, it's a thing that passed down from my grandmother, my mother. I have it. My daughter has it. My grandson has it. It's just something that you have that's more, I don't know, highlighted with some people. It's like you were talking about the spiritual gifts. That was one of them. So they tapped into that. And the way so going back to your question, the difference between how US and other countries do it with the bloodliners versus we don't care about your bloodline, we're just going to use you. Russia has been around forever. And they have shed so much blood on their land. Ukraine is just soaked with human blood. You have all these principalities who have the powers. The Bible talks about it, right? And they appeal to those principalities. They want life. They want blood. Blood isn't the life, Bible says. So they're saying like, hey, you've got all this blood. This war is for you guys. We want your powers. We want to tap into your powers. And here's the blood. So they made the witchcraft, right? They made this pact with them. That's their vehicle. That's their permission. The energy, the powers that they have from the other, from the entities. And the rest of it is more like, it's more like voodoo, which is you have the.
If I'm understanding you correctly, what you're saying is that because Russia is so ancient and because there's already been so much blood spilt on the land, there's already these pacts in place with these very powerful entities. So there's no need to really access more kids with more bloodlines because that's all in place. It's like the structure is already there.
Right. Especially with iniquity. And the difference between sin and iniquity, you can fall into sin. It was an accident. You know, I did this. Iniquity is something premeditated. You're going to plan how you're going to rob a bank. You're going to plan how you murder somebody. So throughout all these centuries, there's so much iniquity that has collected. And that's another thing, vehicle that they need, highway. And that's there too. So Bible, I have to go back to this because what I want people to understand that in Revelation 18:13, it says that, talks about the Babylon, the great system that we have, that we're all part of, where they're selling and trading. And the end of it says that they're selling the slaves, humans. And then the last part, and not every translation will have this, they're selling human souls. The whole 2 verses, they're making a difference between everything that they're selling. And human souls is one of them. We're talking about trafficking, right? Sex trafficking and slavery. Now it's time for us to discuss selling souls. This is the future. This is part of the metaverse that is coming in. And meta means death in Hebrew. We have to acknowledge this. People have to understand that your soul can be stolen. Your children's soul, you can almost count on, will be stolen. And you need to tell them how to get it back. we have to wake up to this. We have to team up with the Holy Spirit, go back to the parts that we buried that happened to us, forgive ourselves, forgive, because eventually you become a perpetrator, as you know. Yeah, they torture you, but then after a certain, so you have to forgive them. Then you have to forgive yourself because you've done the torturing, and then you have to forgive the ones who tortured your children because they tap into your children, and that's another show, another level of forgiveness. But so the way they do it is they've got all these permissions, let's say, to work with the entities, and they program you with 0, 1.
So they're going to find you. Sorry to interrupt you. So they're not after your bloodlines as a child. Now they're after spiritual gifts. So it's really just the energy. Like you, for example, would have had the gift of clairvoyance. Maybe somebody would have had the gift of music, you know, because I know the voice frequency is a very potent weapon they use to open and close things and stuff like that. So really they would have then checked out your abilities at school, I would imagine, or in your social environment, and seen and probably given you little games to play here and there. Good. So they would have groomed you basically at school. And then you would have been one of those that got taken to this 2-week, call it concentration camp, right? The kid camp, where you were then plugged up and done all sorts of things to. Okay, I'm with you. Got it.
Yeah, so let me put in another verse in here, and I think George from the Reveal Report is going to love this because it's about Solomonic magic. And the verse is in Ecclesiastes. Solomon wrote it, and he goes about how your life is. Nothing is new under the sun. When you die, your body goes to, dust. Your spirit goes with the Lord. But then there's another verse that talks about the inner you. Like, you're not dead until this inner you is done and gone. And the verse talks about the cord, the silver cord. It talks about the bowl, gold bowl. It talks about the pitcher. When the pitcher is broken, you're done. And then the wheel of life, you're done. So this is how the programming is. They base everything on that one verse. Everybody talks about the silver cord, and the silver cord is your connection, your oneness with something. They put the desire when they're creating your parts, and one of the ways that you do it is, when somebody has gone through trauma, let's say somebody passed in their life, you tell them to come and sit down over there, they will. Come and eat, drink this, they will, because they're so under so much trauma, they will do whatever you tell them to do. Right? That just happens with anybody. You're in an accident, they'll do whatever you tell them to do because their brain is just not working. So same here, when they traumatize you enough and then they'll say, hey, do this, you're going to do that. So they've created this silver cord by telling you, giving you, like, you're going to like this. You can connect with this. You're so traumatized that, yeah, okay, I'll connect with this, right? So that's your silver cord. Then you get this altar. You have the gold bowl that the verse talks about. Your brain can only carry one thought at a time. That's why they need so many altars. Whatever gift you have, they're going to make an altar out of it, right? So there's your altar. And then the pitcher is whatever they're programming into you. And that could be like us, many of us, the social media, whatever we let into our body. We made that connection with the social media, and now we're pouring it in. We're kind of programming ourselves too, or listening, letting them program us on a massive scale. But so here, it's a bit more specific. Now, whatever they narrative they give you constantly, that's the picture that the verse talks about. And then it talks about the wheel. And if you know anything about any ancient culture, you will always see the sign, symbol of the wheel, image of the wheel, always, especially in Freemasonry, right? It's just the wheel is there. And the wheel would be, it's like the autopilot, the engine. And we were born, Bible says that we were in God the Father. Our essence was in him, his glory, right? That comes down through us, through the human when we are born. And it has not been tainted in children. their mindset has not been tainted. So this energy is very pure in children, and it's beautiful and it's powerful. Doesn't matter if they're small, it's powerful because they're so pure and innocent. That's why they're after the children that much more. So it's that Bible verse that they're using to program people. Then they throw in the Kabbalah, which goes back to the Jews. I'm Jewish quite a bit, a lot. So they're tapping into that. And then it's the voodoo, pretty much. So in the voodoo, you have the witch who has the powers, the entities going through the witch, right? Because of all the pacts that she's made, all the sacrifices that she has done. So now when she has this little doll and she puts the little pins in, right? Whatever pain you want, whatever you want done, you pay her money, she'll put the spell on them, but she will do exactly what you tell them to do. Same here when they program you, because of all the pacts that they've made with the powers above, air of the air. Let's say your spiritual gift, the clairvoyance, right? They're going to assign zeros. Let's say now they need me to be a warrior or assassin, whatever. They're going to assign Athena, because she had the wisdom. You got to have strategy. How are you going to go and take somebody out? So they'll assign the number ones to it. You got to be victorious. They're going to assign Nike. So basically, the different powers that the entities have, they will give them numbers, and they create this little code, and it's in the computer. We're electrical, right? We're constantly having this energy coming out, and they're controlling it through this. I have an implant right here. I'll talk about it in a second, but they create these codes, and now this code is on the computer. Now they can sell it to anybody. So whatever avatar you create, you can call it clone, however you want to call it, right? It doesn't matter what it is. And you can, a robot, you can put that code into them. And it has some of my gifts, and it has the other powers, gifts from the other entities also in there. And they just sell it.
I want to just wrap that up. Mm-hmm. So just to sort of get, because this, I think, it's certainly very new information for me, and I'm sure it's probably quite new for our viewers as well, or some of them anyway, who knows. But so basically they would then have different powers, as you say, different, Athena would be the warrior one, and you would have different names, different entities, if you will, right, that are assigned numbers. So then they write the code based on those entities with those numbers. So that is the code they have, that they therefore then implant in the avatars that they create of, in this case, you. So they've actually therefore then created avatars of you, and are then selling the avatars. So they're not necessarily selling you, but they're selling the avatars of you with your programming.
With my soul. Yeah. And your soul is just, there's layers to it. It's like a ball with glorious light coming through it. It's just a bunch of layer. So you can sell parts of it, like, all the experiences, all the connections that you've made, soulmates that you've gotten created. That's little like soul parts. So every avatar that they have of me is the soul parts that they have sold, exactly what the Bible is talking about.
Yeah. And so each avatar will have a personal connection with you as well, because each avatar actually then is a personal bit of you, plus a whole lot of spliced up.
Yep,
gifts.
Exactly.
Wow.
Right. And I live outside DC, so there's a lot of people around me who are undercover. They all have their clearances, who work for the 3-letter agencies, right? And sometimes they'll talk just a little bit. So when I ask them, like, well, what is it that you do exactly? They're like, oh, just a bunch of codes. We're just programmers. We're just moving codes around.
And this is what they're doing.
And they don't even know what they're doing, but they are controlling souls. They're trafficking souls. That's why it's so secret. It's undercover. Yeah, no kidding. How many people would want to go into that and do that? But there's the undercover. And then there's another part, which we'll talk when we're talking about my daughter's programming. They'll have these places also in their buildings, and there's the 3-letter agencies, where they will torture people. And when you're tortured, you create that altar, right? And that's when you insert that code into them. So they're making their soldiers in those government buildings. And they've got everything under their fingertips, literally. And this just goes on and on and on, doesn't stop. So the metaverse is just, it's preparing this world, setting it up for that metaverse. And
so that's why they don't really need people there in that area to be selling their souls anymore. They have got enough, what did you call it, iniquity, right? In terms of pacts made with the demonics over many hundreds and thousands of years, and that's already in place. So now this is kind of what makes Russia the superpower, because it's not how many nuclear bombs they can build and how far they can shoot them. It's literally having cracked the code of how to completely create a human avatar, and it's not a clone, right? It's not a clone.
There was one. I think so. There was one part of me that I could foretell the future. So there was a bunch of businessmen around me in suits, ties, and they were using me to foretell, what to buy, what to sell, how to go about their business. They used me for that. And I saw myself in cages hanging off the ceiling in the dungeon. I was buck naked, and there was 3 of me, and I looked identical. Every one of them looked identical. So they were like clones. They were exactly, looked like me, like when I was my late teens, early 20s. That's how I looked. And they were just using me. They'll parade me wherever I needed to be paraded, whatever business, but they would tap into me to know how to go about their business. That's one of the things I had to disconnect.
So your different avatars, would have different numbers, I would imagine. Each one would have.
Right. Let's see. Yeah. Oh, I've got a story for that one too. Right. One of the parts. During the healing process, because a year and a half ago, after the certain very specific prayers, and the reason why they're so specific, Dan Duval and Amanda Bice does this very well. They understand it because they work with so many people. The prayers have to be specific because they will tap into your organs, various organs, because every organ has a different frequency, right? Like your liver has a pretty good frequency. It does a lot of work in your body. So they attach the Queen of Heaven to my liver, and so on. But so with these particular prayers.
What's the Queen of Heaven?
Ashtar, she's called under different, Osiris, she's called under different names in every culture. But I think the Bible refers to her as the Queen of Heaven. Vicious, very stunning, beautiful, but so brutal and so vicious. She has a lot of power. A lot of powers are under her. Entities are under her. She's one of the principalities, or higher. Anyhow, so Jesus set me down. Oh yeah, after those prayers, there's some demonic entities like that came out of me. Another one was Hydra, that huge snake, water snake, just horrific. And I would feel it. I can see things, I can feel things. And it's coming out of me as Dendual is praying, and I'm agreeing with this prayer. And the angels came by to pull it out of me. I was losing my mind. It was so real. It was so horrific. And then I plopped down, and he's still praying. Like his prayers can be over 20 minutes. And I'm agreeing, like, yeah, just get all this stuff out of me. And he's praying. Then I'm laying down because I'm just white. My brain is just white. I can't believe that this is happening. And I'm laying there, and there's a huge golden snake that comes, a brown snake that comes out of my vagina. And I'm like, okay, I thought the other one was bad. This is just, can't handle it. And then I remember that now and then I just picture, I see this, I have this image actually quite often that I'm being raped with a snake. It's just disgusting. And later on, I came across one of the videos where another survivor was talking about they do a ritual where they wrap the snake around the wrist, and that's how they will rape the person with that snake. It's just a ritual, right? Another thing, now they'll make a treaty or a pact with the demons. They got to do this. So she validated what I went through. And that's why I appreciate your show so much, and some of the other shows, is the testimonies that people will give. It validates our memories. It validates our crazy thoughts that we think are crazy. It's like, no, there's another person who went through this too. Oh, wait, and there's another person who went through it. Like Fiona, she mentioned about how they're using young girls to kill. Why? Because they look very innocent. You don't see what's coming at all. And then this girl pulls out a huge, big old gun that she can barely hold, and she takes you out just like that. And that's how they use me, right? And that validated, again, exactly that. And like what, going back to what Jesse said, with the president, Reagan, allowing them to do all this, Russia jumped on the possibility of creating all the soldiers, and they did it, right? And then they opened the borders up later in '89 for the Jewish people to leave the country, and they were leaving to Israel and then to US. And Reagan was accepting about 2,000 people a month into US. So they were bringing all these pre-programmed people or programmed people, some of the young people in here, and that's how they got their. I think I will talk about it for a second, if that's okay.
Yeah, please, absolutely.
The super soldiers, right?
Yeah,
we're here. And I heard one of the anchors in Russia was just on the street. He interviewed Putin, and one of his questions was, well, what do we do about all these super soldiers who are out there in different countries? And Putin's reaction was like, they've been well trained. They know what they're doing. They know what to do when the time will come. Like, he acknowledged the super soldiers, sleeper soldiers, who are in other countries.
Okay, please hold that thought right there. And I know my viewers don't like me interrupting, and I'm not interrupting, guys. I'm just trying to get this picture here. So you saying from those kids in 1984 or 1983, whenever it was, with Reagan, when the military weapons were on display, they weren't big tankers and what have you. They were kids. Then Russia bought some of those kids, I would imagine, because they were for sale. Okay. So I'm trying to, I would imagine then, because why I'm asking that question is, Russia would already had the technology, right? And maybe taken some more information from these kids to build more of their own soldiers. No, with these advanced kids already.
I don't know. I personally think that they manufactured the Chernobyl accident to have all of these children in the hospital. So here's what I've read recently. There's over 2 million people to this day. It's been 35, 37 years since it happened. To this day, who are registered under this health care. People who are still affected by the radiation, because people like me who have had children, their children are having problems. They go in and out of the hospital, sometimes for weeks. And they can keep on programming even the children's children to this day. So this accident gave them a great deal of souls, a great deal of people who have to go to the hospital, have to. They're the conditions that radiation will give you. You have to be at the hospital for days, many of them. Diet conditions, heart conditions, and so on. So they have this continuous flow of children who they have at their disposal, and they're continuously programming them. They don't need to buy anybody else, excuse me. They've got their flow of children, plenty. Okay. I was going to, the soldiers, right? The sleeper soldiers.
Yeah, sleeper soldiers.
So, right. Golly, where do I start? When they were programming us, having us look at that screen at the hospital where the bombers were going by, right? So that image is in our head. Now, the last couple of years, all of a sudden, I started getting ear ringing, but then also any sentimental thing that I would do for my husband, and if he made me angry just a little bit, I would go off and my mind would be with the Russians. And mind you, I don't have any Russians friends. I despise Russians. I didn't know why for years I tried thinking like, what is it about me that makes me despise Russians? Why don't I have Russian friends? Why don't I cook Russian food? Like, I don't tap into my Russian culture. Don't care if my kids know Russian. None of it. Like, that's just so weird. It's my background. It's me. Why do I despise them so much? And so I don't think about them. And all of a sudden, whenever I get angry with not too angry, with my husband, I think about the Russians. Now all of a sudden, I'm with the Russians. I'm Russian. They're my brothers. They're my life. Like, that's just weird. And then when I'd be doing these essential things for him, again, I would imagine Russian soldiers. I'm like, that is just bizarre. We've been married for 25 years by then. Like, why are these images coming to my head? Why do all of a sudden I despise doing some things for my husband, which I've done for, over 2 decades? That was so, so strange. And then I remembered that programming, the screen with the bombing. Then I started getting dreams about US being bombed. It was dream after dream after dream, where US was under a surprise attack. There's Russian soldiers here on the ground. There's equipment here on the ground. Everything is set for US to go under a couple of surprise attacks where we're just bombed unexpectedly. And we're leveled. And then at the end, the Russians pilots are flying away and they're waving to people down on the ground by. It's like, hey, we didn't mean it. No hard feelings. We just did what we were told to do. And that type of a thing. And yeah, US was leveled. People, they didn't have businesses to go back to. Everything had to be rebuilt, right? And if you look at some of the other countries, like the ghost countries that China has with the latest technology, you look at NEOM, Saudi Arabia, they have 5G cities with the new technology. US doesn't. What a convenient way for them, an excuse to bring in this new technology, new neighborhoods, new buildings, new everything, if they were leveled quite quickly. Yeah. So maybe that's why US allowed all of these super soldiers to come in. They're prepping this up, setting it up. Just my thoughts. My thoughts.
Well, I think you're definitely not the first person to say that. I know Fiona Barnett is also, we were speaking about it early on, has been saying that it has not made her popular at all. But she knows. It's like, and it's exactly these sleeper soldiers that have been programmed for these end times. And what's interesting is that I've noticed that people who are being triggered now, if you will, are generally between their early 40s to early 50s. So it seems to be, that generation of a decade where there seems to be a lot of that happened then. What is your opinion on that? Why do you think it's that specific age group that was targeted?
No, I think it's just the timing, what Reagan, the permission
Okay.
that he gave, right? And it
Okay.
just, I started unfolding just the
So
way it
it
is.
was, yeah, just the timing of the kids at the time and the kids they were using at the
Oh,
time.
yeah, I forgot to mention, as I was going through this healing process, cutting myself off from all of it, God woke me up in the middle of the night and he said, look up, it was like CCP salt, wrote it down somewhere, but it's a treaty, it's a Russian-American missile treaty that they signed in 1971, right before Reagan did this, right, allowed this. And the operation was called SALT. I'm pretty sure
Movies.
most people have seen the movie Salt, right, with Angelina Jolie. So if you think about Salt, if you think about the surrogates with Bruce Willis movie, they're showing those avatars, those clones. The whole society is built with them. So I strongly recommend watching the movie Surrogates. I strongly recommend watching the movie Salt. And then Anna. That was another one that really triggered me. Like, oof, that's just too close to home. But all of these, there's several other movies. My husband tells me, like, I'm going to turn this movie on, but you are not allowed to talk. Because most of the time, like every other scene, I'm going like, that's real. That's not a movie. That is real. Um, yeah, they're real. I'm telling you, people, they are
Absolutely.
real.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. So, what type of, if you can share with us, what type of operations as a child were you
mm,
forced, and I say forced to partake in? I understand that must be a little bit sensitive, possibly, but is there something you can share with us just to give us some kind of an idea?
yeah. So again, I have to emphasize that the way they programmed us, they did not need to tap into us physically. All of that was already set. They had the stage of everything. So and I'm also grateful for my parents' prayers, who pray like to protect us from evil. Yeah, we were protected from evil, but our soul was still stolen, right, and abused. One of the things was, as a child, and I mean 7, 8 years old, maybe at the most. This is the revelation that I have. I'm just going to call it revelation. Sometimes I would get downloads with Jesus from Jesus as I'm waiting on the Lord. He will give me the image, the memory, and then other times it'll be through dreams. And your spirit man does not sleep. So I got to set a stage for this. Your spirit man does not sleep. In the Bible, God made covenants with people. Abraham told Mary that she's going to be pregnant with Jesus, right? Joseph. He made covenants with them in their sleep, in their deep sleep. So the things that happen to us in sleep is quite real. Quite real. Spiritual realm is more real than this physical realm.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. Life is
you,
spiritual.
yeah, right. And your spirit man will testify back to you when you team up with the Holy Spirit and your spirit. They will. Holy Spirit is the revelator. So they will reveal to you what has happened. Your spirit man sees everything, right? So I was getting these revelations, these memories, if you will. One of them was I'm running through the woods, middle of winter, and I'm just in my little underwear as a child, pretty much buck naked, running through the snow, running and running around. I'm like, that is so bizarre. Why would I do that? Another one is I'm I'm brought into this very fancy hotel. The lobby is just awesome, majestic, all the gold, velvet, plush. And there's wealthy men who sit with their bodyguards here and there. And there's a balcony up on top. And so I come in with this huge gun, girl, right, 7, 8 years old, barely holding a gun. And I kill this fat man. As soon as I kill him, as soon as I shoot him, uh, a handler comes in, he swishes me out. These acrobats are coming down from the second level and they're taking out the bodyguards. And I can talk about that later with the acrobats because they've got people for various things. You're not going to have one important person who's killed without bodyguards. There's always bodyguards involved. It's not just one killing. You got to follow through. There's the cleanup, right? And all about when it comes to killing, especially with the young girls who are doing it, it's all about not letting the viewer, not the viewer, whoever's going to be killed, to register what's standing in front of them. You have to do it very, very quickly. They don't see what's coming. First of all, it's a little girl, yeah, whatever. And then boom, it comes. It's about that. You know, that was their card that we had to follow through. So that's one thing. Another one is there were 3 teams of us. And to be on this team, you had to make a pact and you had to cut your hair. Oh, we'll have to talk about the hair later. Cut your hair to make this pact. There was a woman, it was a Russian woman, who was in charge of us. And we would be teamed up, and our job was to take out presidents. One of the presidents is kind of on the scene, the other one is not on the scene yet. So it was just, after a certain speech or whatnot, our job was to take them out, this country's president, and then that country's president. And then that country would bring up a similar looking president, another clone of that president, that would go on and would kill them again. They'd bring another clone and would kill them again. And it just was a continuous thing that we were doing. It was mainly to slow the country down, like to prevent them from going through with their mission, whatever they had for the world, just to slow them down, saying like, hey, Russia's got this. No, we're the ones who are going to be messing with you. So that was one of the jobs.
Wow.
There's other things, but that's a couple.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. But now, so what's happening to this little avatar of yours that's now done the job? So once she's done the job, what happens then?
To me physically? To my physical body? Oh,
I mean, both. Like because there must be some impact that it had on your physical body as well, since it is a part of you that was actually partaking in that mission. Yes, that as well. And the physical avatar of you. What happens with that one?
So I'll mention another part, another avatar. One of the things, I love running through the snow. Like that's just stood in my head. Like, why do I do that? I don't know. Another one is, well, we'll cover another part. Let me go into another part. You mentioned that some of the avatars would have, like I said, numbers. They would be numbered. So when Jesus was revealing, one of the other things that they used me for was, it was I call it disposable assassin. Disposable.
Because you were a double agent, right? Because you were trained to be a double agent as well. So that hence your love for America 1 minute and then your love for Russia the next minute, and sort of
yeah. And it's not necessarily trained; it was just programmed.
Yeah,
programmed within 2 weeks.
Okay.
Yeah. It's I have seen. Yes, train in the spiritual realm, but not physically, not my physical body, because I did get memories of the training facilities. I've had memories of the labs, but physically I was not there present. So yeah, they were training those avatars, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does. It does.
Okay. So one of the parts when I met her with Jesus, what I saw was a girl, I'm 5'2". She was also 5'2", about in her early 20s, chiseled, well built, strong. And she was dropped off from the helicopter into the middle of a jungle. And then I see in South America, and I see a chopper coming down, and then a wealthy businessman coming out of that chopper. She walks up to him, and the bodyguards are there too. But she walks up to him and she bites into him. And like I said, they use girls, right? Innocent looking girls, where like you don't see a girl coming out of the jungle and biting you, like just so unthinkable. Yeah. And she bites him, and acid starts coming out of her teeth, out of her mouth, and that acid gets into his body, and it starts melting his body away, and it starts melting her afterwards. And the only thing that was left was just this flesh on the ground. You couldn't tell whether it was an animal or what, just like, ugh. guts left. If the man was too big and I didn't have enough acid in me, or that avatar did not have enough acid in it, then there would be more flesh left. So I asked her, like, what's your name? Because with all the parts with Jesus, I would come and ask what their name was. I would ask what their job was, what their weapons were. So with this one, she's like, I'm 147. I'm like, okay. And she goes, I'm sold on the black market. I'm like, okay. And so she said that it's the BRIC countries, or the countries that have money and want to spend their money in this technology, how to create these disposable assassins, or Terminators. There we go. Think of the movie Terminator. Yeah, the movie Terminator. He's got the flesh on, he looks like a human, but he's a machine on the inside. Except for these machines are filled with acid, brutal acid. So she's like, sold in the black market. Okay. They buy them when they need somebody killed and without a trace left. So, and then with Jesus, well, hold on a second. You asked me how I feel physically, right? How it affects me physically.
Yeah.
So this avatar, the way it affected me physically was I would go into these crying frenzies where I would just weep and weep and weep without knowing why. It felt like somebody died, somebody very, very close to me died, and I was crying on their behalf. As you know, kids got married, left the house, I would call them on those days, like, there's something serious happening to you, because it's so close to me, so dear to my heart. And they're like, no, Mom, we're fine. We're doing great. I would call the next child, like, something up. I'm like, no, we're fine, Mom. I'm like, okay. And then I realized that every time that Terminator, that assassin, disposable assassin died, part of me died too. I felt it. And then another thing is, I'm like drinking coffee, right? I add honey to my coffee because it brings the acid down. I will eat meat with garlic because it brings the acid, alkalizes the food. I will still eat on my little strips to make sure my pH levels are low. Like, it messes with your head. It's just silly, but it does. It's part of you. The crying was not, that was brutal. I did see, Jesus showed me that I saw a lab in Moscow, and there was but 5 of them piled up on the floor, already prepared. These Terminators were prepared, me looking, all of them, me looking. And then there was a pile of them leaning against the wall. And I'm looking, and there's, of course, the computer screens, just a typical lab, again, with tile on the walls, and some lockers there. And I was just taken away. It was so real. I'm like, that is just not fair. Those exactly me looking things right there, but they're killing people. And Jesus walked up to one of the stations there in the lab, and he showed me a basket of my hair. And he showed me that to activate every avatar, this Terminator, they would take a little piece of hair and they would put it right up here to activate it. So then whatever, I guess, some spiritual things that I've got in me, my personality, I'm a Scorpio.
Your DNA.
Right, that would activate it. So these countries that are buying these Terminators, they would buy it, they would transport on a plane, whatever country they needed to be in, where once they got to the place, they would activate me, and then I would carry out that avatar would carry out the deed, and no trace left.
So yep. I'm interested then as well, you know, when they've used bits of your soul, so to speak, in the avatars, and let's say the avatars have then died, been exterminated.
Some.
Doesn't your soul come back to you, those bits? Where do the bits go that they've then used? Do they keep them hostage, or what happens? How does that work?
There's another verse. It's not in Ecclesiastes, but it talks about snares. God was against their snares. He's talking to the Jews, and he said, I despise the way you are catching souls, and you're catching them into your snares. And the snare would be like the lamp, lampshade sits on a snare. It's almost like a cage, if you will. So that verse tells us when they catch the soul, they put it into a cage. And that's also another thing that God revealed to me was when I was waiting on the Lord, like wherever you want to take me for this healing process, I'm there ready. And we are hovering over the Black Sea. And in the Black Sea, I see Leviathan and I see the water god. What's his name? Neptune. Yeah.
Neptune.
So, yeah. So they've got these two powers over, and I've looked up, scientists found out that the Black Sea is made out of these two almost holes, right? So they got two power entities over it. But in the Black Sea, and I started weeping like crazy when I saw it, it was cages and cages from floor to up, like everywhere, of souls. These captured souls, these fiery, beautiful balls, blue and golden light coming out of them, and they were all in cages. He showed me that, so I call it their soul pantry.
Wow.
And then he showed me how there were black pipes almost going from the Black Sea to the Mara Little Sea, and then to the Mediterranean Sea. So they're using all of those Mediterranean mythological Greek mythology, all those powers, gods. They're just trafficking them, if you will, or not trafficking, but just allowing through the water systems, going through the Black Sea. And that's, like I said, it's their pantry where they keep them. And then when they need to use them, they'll take that soul out and they'll use, I want a little bit of Medusa here, I want a little bit of Athena here, Zeus over here. They just like a recipe, they'll create that formula, throw everything in. And then he also, one of the parts, again, when I was detaching myself from it, it was in the not the Black Sea, it was the Moscow River. So every big major city, London, Rome, DC, Spain, not Spain, they're all located right by the river. There's things that are in the rivers and things that they use the water for, and you can go into that, as you know. But in that Moscow, there was also the floor was lined up with these cages with the souls. So again, it goes back to the verse. Once they capture the soul, it is in that cage. And
they will then harvest it whenever they want it, because that's their food, right? That's their louche, so to speak. Okay.
And for me, physically, it felt for 41 years that I was living many lives in one day sometimes. And I had no idea. You think it's normal when you don't know any better. From 6 years old, you think it's normal to go from, hey, right now I feel like killing you. Right now I'm telling you to change your mind into this. Like, you just shift drastically from one. And the interesting thing is the personality stopped changing. It was coming through when I was a teenager. If you talk to my sister, she'll tell you how angry I was, how I love to fight, scrub the hair, scratch, just brutal. And that changed after I had kids. Like, I became very calm, very tenderhearted, and that stayed. But internally, it was chaos. It was a battlefield. Like, I'm invincible one day, and then I'm as lonely as could be the next moment, crying. And I know darn well that my life is just beautiful, very blessed. It's not my life that I'm living that is making me have these thoughts or these feelings. They most definitely affect you greatly.
Lira, something's going on with your internet.
Oh no.
Just some of the comments in the thing of the people commenting that very high noise we were experiencing earlier seems to be back. It's not dragonfly. It's not wind chimes. Yeah, it's yeah. Is that better, guys? Lira, can you hear me? Are you there? Okay, Lira seems to have frozen up.
How about now? Can
Okay,
you
are
hear
you
me
there?
now? Yeah,
I
is it
can
any
hear
better?
you. I was actually fine. I just started hearing that loud, that high noise towards the end, but I noticed in the comments people were saying there's a high noise. Guys, are you still hearing that noise, please? Yeah, it happens when I talk. It's to do with something on Lyra's internet. Not sure what it is, and it kind of gives an echo, but it's
And
fine. You know, we're actually nearly up. We're nearly up to an hour anyway. And we're definitely going to take this interview further because I, for one, am completely mesmerized and there's so much stuff. There's so much still we want to talk about.
yeah,
But in ending, just to wrap up the session today, or our interview today, and as I said, definitely have you back because there's things on Lenin and the Civil War and the Revolution that all links into all of this. We'll get into that in another time. But the question on everyone's mind, is Putin right now. I'd love to know just your from where you've been and where you're at. Don't smile like that, Lira. You look very mischievous. and and also Zelensky in the Ukraine. There's this war going on, and we were talking about, uh, there's either the narrative that the Democrats are pushing, or of course the whatever our community is called, what they're saying in terms of that they're actually adrenochrome labs. There's a lot of bioweapons there. That Putin was actually getting the kids out because Ukraine is very heavy on child trafficking and a very strong Nazi stronghold. So I would just like to know from where you're sitting and what you've experienced and what you've obviously come to understand. What is that about?
and you let me know if you can hear me. If not, then we'll have to take it to another session.
I
But
can hear you.
okay, so it has to go back to Lenin. It goes back to World War I. They gave Ukraine and some of the other smaller countries around it to Germany to end the war. Right then, revolution happened, and when the revolution happened, it's Lenin. He brought all of those countries together, republics together. So all of the countries are under Lenin. Why do you think Lenin is not buried? He doesn't have a birth. He does not have a death certificate. In order for my property to go to my children, they need to see the death certificate. By not burying Lenin, all those countries, land still belongs to Russia, USSR. It's like
Wow.
one of my avatars that they've created, which I have to go into it now, if that's okay, real quickly. I was a diplomat, and this diplomat was stunning. She had four bodyguards, and her job was to screw other diplomats over. So on the screen, on the TV screen, you will see the two presidents making the treaty, shaking their hand, even signing the book, the treaty, but the camera never shows the wording that they're signing on the treaty. So afterwards, they will go and sign the actual treaty, right? So this diplomat, me looking thing comes out, gives them the treaty. She's so stunningly beautiful that they can't even think straight. And then the bodyguards make sure that they don't sign this treaty. It's only done for the look,
Wow.
for the public. But those treaties are not signed unless, Russia really wants it. And the way it's the sleight of hand, if you will, but the sleight of hand, but that's what Lenin, that's why he's not buried. All those countries belong to them. So all of this bloodshed, when Russia needs more blood for their entities, right? The system needs more blood. They live off of the blood. And they're like, okay, now it's time for, we're going to give you back your country, but we're going to have war again because we need some more bloodshed there on that land. So, okay, I think that's why this war is happening. They need a bit more blood, especially before the Antichrist comes in. They just need more power. And I think that's one of the things that is happening now. It's the more bloodshed. Oh, speaking of war, when my implant, I mentioned this implant. It just, when I was going through the healing process, it was itching really, really bad, inflamed, right? And it went away when I was done with this process. And then it got going again when the war broke out. So that tells you that Putin or the Russians, they are trying to activate all of those children, soldiers, everybody who they've invested in, all of those avatars. They are getting them under their wing, under their system, under their control. That's why I was feeling, and it went on for 3-4 weeks until, somebody told me, I've got a word for you, like, you're under attack. I'm like, yeah. And then once I start praying, it's like, oh, it's because of this war. I'm still connected to the system. They want their children. And
so what would these kids, because now these children would be around about early 40s to early 50s. So let's say, within that, as you say, that time that they did that they created these sleeper soldiers. So I would imagine someone like yourself who has now spiritually done a lot of work on herself over the years or whatever. So spiritually, and I'm a great believer in this, and including the Zappity-Do, I'm a great believer in this, is that when your spiritual frequency is of a higher frequency, you completely null and void any programming that's done to you. I don't say you're not going to go into, you don't have to go into healings or whatever. I do believe you do, but I do believe that you have the control to change that. So what about the people, thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands, scary actually, that have not necessarily spiritually awoken, so they then become assets of the Russian government, I would imagine. So what would the plan be? I can't imagine there's only one plan. There must be quite a few plans or quite a few soldiers that are activated right now.
Mm-hmm. So, and as I mentioned before, if you think about the metaverse that is coming, the Antichrist is coming on this earth, it's the image. So they will definitely be using technology to carry out, because, you're worshiping the image, the name, that will be coming on board. So this metaverse is the next generation's reality. Our children, our grandchildren, metaverse will be everything for them. So now Russia has the trump card with all of these. They have their beehive built. They have all these codes they know how various avatars will react. They sold them to other countries, right? They have, they know how to break it down, if you will.
If you're the blueprint. Yep. They've got the blueprint. Oh my gosh. So
if you are the architect,
makes them a superpower, right?
Yep, exactly. And it's specifically for this next generation, the metaverse that's coming. And that's why I said I was recommending watching the movie The Surrogates. It shows it very well how it is done. Very well.
Surrogates.
Yep. It was in 2009. Bruce Willis is in it. Yeah, when you watch that, you will understand, how it is.
Wow.
Pretty bad.
Wow. And this is, yeah. Sorry?
So they're also in bed. Russia is also in bed, will be getting in bed with China. Back about 20 years ago or so, it was, 30 years ago, when I was a child, 40 years ago, it was popular for people to learn English. And yeah, for the last 40 years, U.S. has been on the scene. right, as the powerhouse. And then about 20 years ago, it was trendy for the wealthy Russians to have Chinese tutors for their children, for the Russians to learn Chinese language and Chinese culture. Trump's granddaughter also has a Chinese tutor, Chinese nanny. So Trump also knows that China is going to be coming up on the scene, and he's keeping his foot in the door also, his family in the door, by letting the China. They're going to be together, basically, and
So
that's
this
what
is
I've seen
already
also
already they're
in
marrying.
play. Right.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, but this is like, oh my goodness. So already these guys have been planning this since 20 years ago. I mean, we just look at the infiltration of China into Africa. I mean, it's no, but they don't really care. Yeah. They just do it. They just really don't care. My point is that so these guys have known about this for a long time, and obviously China being in bed with Russia. So they've already, as you say, started having Chinese nannies, Chinese tutoring,
Because they
Chinese.
know, right. So Russia has the one trump card with all of these avatars and technology, other things, but so does China, right? They're all going to be coming together. And that's Bible talks about the end times with the army coming from the north. You got those two coming from the north. Another thing was that I've heard from a friend who went to visit there about 20 years ago. Russia would do these parades. They would be like Woodstock's parties, huge parties on the streets, and for young people, young teens, older teens, young adults. They throw the booze at them, the partying, the music hall, and if you wanted to get married right there on the spot, they would have little priests marrying them right there on the spot. Forget about the family, forget about dating and all. You want to get married, you want to go.
How old are we talking? How these people that were being able to be married right on the spot? When are we talking? What year about? How long ago was?
2000s, early 2000s.
Okay, so then they were having these street parties where kids were going, teenagers, and the authorities were right there saying, if you want to get married, you can get married now. So they obviously taken some alcohol and maybe some drugs and whatever. So feeling very frisky with life and deciding this is the right thing to do. Now, what would be the purpose of that?
More soldiers, more babies in their arsenal, because they're going to be having babies, and because they're so young, not a lot of them are going to be keeping their babies. And Fiona's stories or other stories, what happens there? Fill them in, please. It's wow. Just sickening. It's so manipulative. They're just building out their army.
It's insane. But what about Zelensky? I mean, Zelensky to me is a complete New World Order puppet. So when we're looking at Zelensky in this equation, where does he stand from where you're standing?
He's like I want to call him prophetic puppet. One of my Ukrainian aunts, she posted a video because he was an actor, right? And he did this comedy act. And in there, he talks about, well, how we all eat our children. Pretty soon, Ukraine is not going to be there because we wouldn't eaten up all our children. All of our people, essentially. And the older ones are going to die off. So he's kind of saying, like, Ukraine is not going to be there anymore. Russia will. So I think he is under that same system, in bed, if you will. It's not about the Ukraine, definitely not about the Ukrainian people. It's about what they're bringing forth. And that's this new generation metaverse society that only a few control with their clear thinking.
Speaking about that metaverse, I know Thea, who's in our back room, has been doing research, and we're going to be doing some stuff on this metaverse and what our kids. Guys, I haven't had the courage to watch the stuff yet, but I know Thea has. It is horrific. what is going on in these game rooms with kids. I mean, what Theo is actually saying is that these kids are actually, I mean, they've obviously all got gamed up and what, but they're in this place and they're actually sleeping there. They're not even switching off to go to bed. So they're like in this virtual room, sleeping and hanging out. And let's not even talk about the rooms where they go to be groomed. There's a place, what we were saying, where they get groomed with animals, guys. I mean, we're talking bestiality here as well. It is insane, but we're going to be doing more about this later because it is shocking. And that's exactly what you're saying. The next step is the metaverse, and the kids, we just lose our humanity in the metaverse. And what would the purpose of that be at the end of the day? Why would they want us to lose our humanity? Because they want our souls, right? But what would they want to be doing with us then?
It's more, well, Bible talks about they will seek death and they will not find it. Death will run away from them. They want to be so desperate. They just want to die, but they can't. And once you get into the system, it's exactly that. They've created so many bodies for you, so many avatars, that your soul just keeps going and going. And it's really for the Antichrist, for Satan. You know, Satan doesn't have life, so the least that he can have is this metaverse.
This is what someone is asking you. So what happens to your soul once you're dead and it's, I guess, been taken? And this is why it's so important, where I think prayer and really going through the stuff like you're talking about and like Jesse's been talking about as well, basically, what do you call it? Shunning them out, no longer giving permission. You actually have to do a lot of spiritual work and a lot of prayer to reclaim all those parts of yours. They are there. Your soul can never, ever be destroyed. It's impossible. But I do believe, yes, it can be stolen and held hostage from you or broken or fragmented. But through prayer, through alignment with God and God's will and the higher will and your higher purpose, I have no doubt that you'll bring yourself fully back into your beingness again. There's no doubt in my mind about that. So that doesn't even worry me. All you got to know is it's reclaiming your power, really, isn't it? It's taking back your power, and it's really just understanding you are this amazing and being that even despite all of that, they could not destroy you. That is such a liberating thing, that is such an empowering thing in my world, that all of you overcomers, and I speak to a lot more than what I interview. There's the sense of strength, this inner strength. There's a sense of light that shines. It's like you guys are the healers of the world. Really, you guys that have come through this are the healers of the world. And it's a blessing to work with you already.
I have to add one more thing, and this can be another show, how I did it with Jesus. But I think the difference between survivors and the overcomers, you have to understand that it's a two-way street. If they can get to you, you can get back to them. You go back into those places with Jesus. You explode those labs. You take them apart. You send Jesus' glory, his fire, his living water, whatever. You undo it. When you undo that, the other souls that were part of it, you set them free also. At the very least, their souls, that those humans who are attached to those souls are their little missions, if you will. When they are freed, after I go in and explode that lab, they have this clarity, this moment of clarity, where they start coming back like, oh, the system is breaking down basically, but you have the authority to go back and undo it. And you have to do it. It's your job. It's your duty.
Exactly. And I really think that that's why Jesus came down, to the earth, because, and it's true what they say, came to set the captives free, because Jesus, I think, is really working overtime, and he's especially come for survivors and overcomers that have been through this stuff. Really, I think that is so incredible, because Jesus is the healer. Jesus is the ultimate healer. And remember, Jesus always understood two things. A, if you believe, you are able to be healed. And B, he never ever saw you in your illness. He only ever saw you in God's full glory. And that is the key to healing. I've been a healer for many years. I've healed myself from all sorts of dodgy things. So, and I know the body is designed to heal itself, but you can only do it when you are in full alignment with God and God's will for you. Wow, it's been a little bit longer than we anticipated, so I hope
Too
you're
long.
okay.
Sorry.
No. I hope you're okay. I mean, I can carry on forever and ever. This is a fascinating conversation. So I want to just say to you, thank you.
We are frozen again. Sorry, guys.
Gosh. Is it me again? It's my internet, yeah. On my back?
You're back. But yeah, okay. We've taken our time. Another show.
Yeah, there's more. Absolutely. Yeah, there is so much. There's really so much. And I'm really, really interested to find out more about also stuff and just exposing a lot of what's going on. So thank you, Lira, so much for sharing your story. And I really, really have enjoyed hearing from you. Is there anything you would like to say just in closing for our viewers?
There's many things, but it was John. I was praying before getting on here, waiting on the Lord, what message he had for me. It was John the Baptist who appeared to me, and he, long story, but he emphasized the verse that he wrote, which was, Jesus, God died for you. God gave his son, died for you. If you believe in him, like you said, you will have everlasting life. So what he was emphasizing to me, if us, the parents, if we live our lives showing our children that we believe in the Lord, that he can see us through any situation, if we'll walk it out, they see it, they start implementing it in their life, and they don't die. It's our actions, it's our mindset, right? Yeah. We have to take the responsibility. We have to put aside our social media, our parties, whatever we do, and take the time with the Lord so our children can see it, because that's where the hope comes from. Believe, that's where the freedom comes from.
Absolutely.
Take the time to be in oneness with the Lord and the Holy Spirit. Please.
Absolutely. You have to. You absolutely have to. Thank you, and God bless you, because really, I've really enjoyed chatting with you. Look forward to having you back. So guys, watch the space. We will let you know when Lira will be back and following up, and we'll be talking about her healing journey with her daughter as well, because her daughter was also taken in, if you will, and on
U.S. soil, different type of program.
I can imagine, what you just said earlier on was, that's forgiveness on a whole nother level. When you got to forgive not just your perpetrator, but the one that's done, the ones who've done that to your child. I mean, you got to be big for that. And I mean, I want to say to everyone here, these amazing overcomers are teaching us some beautiful, beautiful, beautiful lessons. Just through, if you guys have been through what you've been through, and you can come out and be okay and have forgiveness for people who've done that amount of abuse, you are golden, and we want to learn from you. Thank you so much. God bless you. Thank you to all our beautiful viewers. Thank you so much for watching and supporting, and just always being here. It's so fun. It's Friday evening, and I'm having a date with you guys.
One crazy woman.
Single in Africa. We have load shedding. I need candles.
Man.
I must say, that's one thing about load shedding. You learn how to get the romance back in your life. That's for sure. Wonderful. Take good care, everybody. Thank you for all the comments. Really appreciate you. Take good care. God bless you all. We'll see you soon. Cherry buys.